How do we keep a balance between our ego and our heart? What are the ways to keep our ego in check? If the ego came and before it told us anything, it said, okay, just to let you know, now is going to be the voice of the ego, it's much easier to handle. Those of us who have been on a spiritual path for a while and are very introspective, we recognize the ego. And it's still there, but it makes it somewhat easier to deal with because you start being able to see, this is just my ego. So even though it's still present, it's not quite as dangerous because we're able to look at it. We've developed a habit of being able to say, I know that voice. That's my ego. I know that mask. That's my ego. I know that game. That's my ego. So for me, for example, I know when it's my ego saying something. So it's not that it goes away entirely. It's not about being kept in check. It's not that I can feel my ego saying something and I lock it in a box and throw away the key. It's not the answer, because then you just have it screaming from in a box inside you. But the last thing that you want are voices screaming from lock boxes inside your own psyche. The point of the spiritual path is freedom, expansion, openness. And so what I have found the best way to deal with the ego is, first of all, we have to learn how to recognize it. Because when we can't recognize the ego, that's when it's dangerous. When the ego takes the form of that inner wisdom, or the ego takes the form of a really valid fear. No, you shouldn't try that, because if you try that, you could fail. And if you fail, then you will be horribly humiliated. And it sounds like it's a really valid argument. But on closer inspection, we realize it's just the voice of the ego telling us you're small, play small, don't ever have courage, don't step up to the plate, don't think outside the box, don't actually expand into the truth of who you are, just stay in this little box. But it's insidious because it doesn't say, by the way, this is just your ego sent to scare you. This is just your ego sent to keep you small. It plays as this very rational, very good, very smart, very helpful voice that's going to guide you on the right path for your life. And really all it is a mix. But it's not a blended mix. It's not like you've thrown all the voices in a blender. It's much more like a really out of sync orchestra of lots of different voices. Some of them are going to be voices of our culture that may say things, for example, like, women shouldn't do that, girls shouldn't do that. Or that may say, you're too old to do that, or you're too young to do that, or you're too poor to do that, or you're not rich enough to do that, or you're not smart enough, or you're not good enough. Or it may be something that says you're stupid, you're worthless. Maybe something that says, don't take the risk. Not a smart decision. So these are voices of the culture that have really been given to us in many ways over our lives to keep us playing certain roles. Some of it may be voices of our parents or our teachers or other family members who meant well. That's the thing. The people are not meaning badly. They weren't trying to harm us. They're just doing the best that they could. speaking from their own place of fear, from their own place of confusion, from their own egos, from their own subconscious programming. And so maybe, for example, when we were young, maybe we got the message in our home that when we came home with good grades, when our room was clean, when we did all of our chores, we got the message from mom or dad that we were a good girl or a good boy. And so we grew learning that our goodness, our value as a human being was rooted in what we did. Cleaned up your room? Good girl. Got good grades on an exam? Good boy. Didn't do well in school? Didn't clean up your room? Didn't do your chores? Came in too dirty? Bad boy, bad girl. Now again, this is just honest, well-intentioned, good-hearted parents trying to do the best they can to discipline their kids, to have us clean our rooms, to have us do well in school. But the messages that we take in are who you are as a person. Your value as a human being is based on what you do. You do well, you do what I want, you are good. You get a place on my lap, you get a big hug and kiss. Maybe in some houses you get cookies and cake or special ice cream or whatever it may be. You don't do what I want. Well, suddenly I'm not so eager to bring you into my lap and give you hugs and kisses. Now I'm disappointed, I'm upset. So what we also learn is that my actions are those that bring happiness or sadness to people I love. That's a heavy responsibility for kids. Not only is my value rooted in what I do, but mom and dad's happiness is also dependent on me. Look, mom was so happy when I came in from school until I told her I failed my math exam. Now suddenly mom's not so happy. Look at the responsibility that I have to keep mom happy. And I mention this because this is all the stuff that our ego gets built out of. When most of us talk of ego, we think just of arrogance. But the ego is much, much deeper and much more subtle than just arrogance. The ego is not only the one who says, oh, you're the best, oh, you're the smartest. The ego is also the one that says, you're stupid, you're worthless, don't do that, don't take the risk. Who do you think you are? So on the one hand, the ego may be the one who says to us, who the hell do they think they are? Like, don't they know who I am, that they should be much more respectful to me? But the ego is also the one who says to me, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to be so brave? Who do you think you are to start that project, to be able to do this, to dream for that, to want to accomplish this, to stand for that? That's also the voice of the ego. And so this is where I say it's like an out-of-sync orchestra. It's a lot of different sounds. It's cultural sounds, societal sounds, sounds of parents, sounds of teachers, sounds of so many people's voices that we've internalized growing up. And so when we talk about keeping the ego in check, it's not about pushing it away, because you end up then locking up a lot of voices. The ego is not just one thing that you say, go, ego, in the box. As I said, it's all these different voices, different feelings, different fears, different desires. A lot of what we yearn for, a lot of the stuff that we call success. When you have a lot of money, when you have a good job in a good company, that's what we view as success. Well, again, this is workings of the ego. This is cultural and societal norms that we've internalized. Oh, you got that job in that company, you must be really proud of yourself. Oh, you're an artist or a musician? I'm so sorry. Is there nothing else you could do? Right? I mean, this is sadly the way that our culture operates. Parents whose children are punch and time clocks in multinational companies. Oh, you must be so proud of him or her. Parents whose children are artists or musicians, sannyasis, school teachers. Get, oh, interesting. Right? Not the same, oh, you must be so proud. So we live in this culture again that's giving us all these different norms. What's acceptable? What's success? And then of course we judge ourselves by that. So when we talk about the ego, it's a lot broader. It's a lot more subtle. And so keeping it in check is not about, as I said, sticking it in a box. It's about being aware of it. That's all it is. Being aware. Oh yeah, there's the voice of my 5th grade teacher who told me I would never amount to anything. Well, that's all right, because Einstein's teacher told him he wouldn't amount to anything either. So, okay. Can live with that. Ah, there's the voice of my mom or my dad or an uncle or an aunt or a relative who told me that I was only valuable if I looked a certain way or acted a certain way. Told me I should gain weight or lose weight. Try some new fairness cream, dress differently. Well, okay, I can understand. He or she was going through their own difficult time. He or she had their own issues. And we start to really understand the pieces of our ego. We start to be able to see them for what they are. Oh yeah, I understand how this is a cultural norm. And just to be able to name it for what it is. And then when the ego comes up, you're able to look at it not as some horrible evil being, but just kind of as this annoying neighbor who sometimes gets a little bit too loud when you're trying to meditate or think or sleep. Who you meet on the doorstep. Maybe you used to let the neighbor in the house because you didn't realize that you'd never get him out. But now you meet that neighbor on the doorstep. You say, oh, so nice to see you. No, now's not a very good time, but I hope you have a wonderful day. See it for what it is. As you see the ego arise, and this is really what a lot of the path of mindfulness is about. It's not about bad ego. It's about just understanding, yeah, I have these components in me that have been imprinted upon me during different aspects of my life. They're not the truth of who I am. They're not soul or spirit or consciousness or love or truth. They're just impressions that have been made upon me by different voices, different values, different experiences I've had. Maybe I was made fun of in a class for being too fat or being too skinny, so I developed a complex about it. Maybe I was made fun of in class for not being able to do math. So I became afraid of math or afraid of numbers. I convinced myself I'm not a math person. Whatever it is, we start to see things and understand where they're from. And what happens then is they just lose their power over us. So the way to keep the ego in check is simply to see it for what it is. It's just impressions upon us from people, from places, from experiences that are not truth, not capital T truth, not wholeness or fullness, not soul, spirit, consciousness, but that are just impressions. We see them for what they are, but we don't let them run the show. So like the neighbor, you've come back to tea today. Well, unfortunately, not going to be a good time. But nice to see you. So we're not killing it. It's not about kill the neighbor, kill the ego. But it's also not about feeling horribly, oh my God, that neighbor came to visit again today. Oh my God, my ego came back. Just see it. Yeah, there was my ego. And you actually can develop, and for me, I have found this works personally very well, just a very deep interest. My ego arises and I think, that's so interesting. Hasn't come to me like that in a while. That's a whole new face of my ego that I haven't actually seen before, or haven't seen in years. Wow, how interesting. I wonder what it was about that situation that made that aspect of my ego come up. And then it becomes just another pathway into understanding ourselves. And so see if you can develop, instead of this love-hate, I've got to kill you relationship with it, can you develop just a bit of interest in it? But nothing that's too serious. Nothing that takes it too seriously. Again, it's your quirky neighbor. Kind of knocks on the door at all hours. Not very convenient times. See it, acknowledge it, recognize to yourself, oh, that's my ego. But don't invite it in. Don't sit it down for tea. Don't bring it into your bed. Don't give it a room in your house. Don't leave your house to it in your will. Don't give it any control over you. Just recognize, yeah, you also exist. And then we come back into our spiritual practice of creating space. Instead of trying to squeeze the ego out, can I be aware of a spaciousness in me that also includes space for this guy over here to coexist? He doesn't get to run the show. He doesn't get to tell me what to do. He doesn't get a room in my house, at least not my inner house. But I'm not looking to kill him, annihilate him. You know, we talk about annihilating the ego, and I've always felt that that's a really, it's ideal if you could do it, but I've never seen it work in an effective way. Usually all that ends up happening is you're doing battle with yourself inside. And the problem with that, as I always say, is you go to sleep with the loser. Doesn't matter who wins. You're all in one bed together. It's all inside you. And so if you've got to take the loser of the battle to bed, do you really want to try to have a battle with yourself? Instead of that, understand, yeah, the ego's there. It exists. I know what it's made out of. I know where it came from. I can see the different pieces. I don't need to annihilate it. But I just need to understand he's not running the show, or she's not running the show. And the less power you give it over you, the less troubled you'll be by it. The ego is powerful only when we run from it. We're afraid of it. We're trying to annihilate it. If we just can kind of see it and smile at it and say, have a good day, thanks so much, I've got something more important going on. It actually ends up being much, much more innocuous, much more harmless. And then it just coexists in this ever-expanding space of the truth of who you are.